In this day and age, we are exposed to an overwhelming amount of unreliable reports, fake news, heavily biased data, and straight-up misinformation every single day. And if you're like most people, media literacy probably wasn't a skill that was ever explicitly taught to you. Most people are just expected to somehow know the difference between credible information and manipulated or misleading content, even though the information environment that we're living in right now is unlike anything humans have ever experienced before. We are facing a very specific problem that is unique to our time. Nearly everybody has a platform. Anyone can publish an opinion, frame it as a fact, and circulate it instantly to thousands or even millions of people. Information moves faster than it ever has before, and the sheer volume of it makes it incredibly difficult to slow down, evaluate, and think carefully before accepting or sharing it. On top of all of that, much of what shows up in search results and social media feeds isn't there because it's accurate, but because it generates clicks, reactions, and engagement, which means emotionally charged or extreme content often gets amplified whether it's reliable or not. So if reading the news, scrolling social media, or doing research for a class ever feels exhausting or confusing, that reaction is pretty reasonable. The real question then is, how do we filter all of this information without losing time, energy, or sanity? Hey guys, my name is Dr. Whitney Kosters, and as a professor of literature and writing, a big part of my job is teaching students how to read critically, how to identify red flags in sources, how to recognize manipulation and bias, and how to make responsible decisions about what information is actually trustworthy. So that is exactly what this lecture series is designed to help you with. I have divided this lecture into two videos. In this video, we are going to focus on how to spot manipulated information and identify red flags that signal misinformation or heavy bias. In the second video, I'm going to walk you through how to conduct an efficient and effective search using Google. I will also teach you where to find reliable academic and non-academic sources and how to use a simple checklist to evaluate credibility and reliability. And for anyone who wants something concrete to work with, that checklist is available as a downloadable resource linked in the description box of both videos. If this kind of material is helpful, be sure to subscribe to the channel for more content on literature, writing, research, and rhetoric, because these skills matter far beyond a single class or assignment. Now, sometimes red flags are obvious. An article might make extreme claims, rely on emotionally loaded language, or distort information in ways that immediately raise suspicion. But the more dangerous forms of misinformation are often much subtler. These are sources that look credible on the surface, include some verifiable information, and still manage to mislead by leaving out context or transparency. And this is usually the moment where it helps to slow down, stop scrolling, and decide whether the source actually deserves your attention before continuing to read or share it. Being a responsible reader means not passively accepting information just because it sounds factual. Let me give you an example. I hold a doctorate. I have a PhD in English, which means I'm an expert in literature, rhetoric, and scholarly writing. But if someone were to quote me as Dr. Whitney Kosters in an article discussing the relationship between GMO foods and cancer without explaining my actual field of expertise, that would be extremely misleading. Most readers would reasonably assume that I'm a medical doctor with relevant scientific training, even though that assumption would be completely wrong. So when an expert is quoted in any source, one of the first things to do is pause and look them up. Take a minute to see what they actually research, where they publish, and how their expertise connects to the claim being made. Are they working in the field being discussed? Are other scholars citing their work? Do they have professional or financial ties to corporations, political organizations, or industries that might benefit from the claims they're making? Now remember, bias doesn't automatically make information false, but extreme or undisclosed bias absolutely undermines credibility and objectivity. Another common indicator of credibility is peer review, which generally means a piece of research has been evaluated by experts in the field before publication. Peer-reviewed journals are often excellent sources, especially for academic research. But even here, critical reading still matters. It's worth taking a moment just to check who publishes the journal, who funds it, and what institutional relationships exist behind it before treating the findings as unquestionably neutral. For example, imagine a professional journal associated with a major hospital where reviewers are also employees or stakeholders, and where board members have financial ties to pharmaceutical companies. If those same pharmaceutical companies have representatives connected to the hospital, it raises legitimate questions about what kinds of research are more likely to be published and which findings might be harder to circulate. That doesn't mean peer-reviewed research should be dismissed, but it does mean that this is a situation where confirming the information through a separate independent source becomes especially important. Statistics and numbers are another area where information can look authoritative without actually being reliable. Numbers tend to feel official because they look scientific, but statistics are only as meaningful as the methods used to produce them. So when you come across claims like 77% of women prefer iced coffee over hot coffee, this is a good moment to pause and ask where that number came from before accepting it. Who was surveyed? How large was the sample? Where were the participants located? Without that context, stats function more as persuasion than as evidence. Now let's talk about the internet, which has become the primary source of information for most people. Unlike traditional print publications, much of what's online hasn't been vetted, edited, or fact-checked before publication. Anyone can post content instantly, and once it circulates, it can be incredibly difficult to trace back to its origins. Wikipedia is a great example here. It can be useful as a starting point for basic background information, but it shouldn't be treated as a final authority for academic research. Wikipedia openly acknowledges that anyone can edit its content and that contributors don't need formal expertise. That transparency is actually a strength, but it also means the responsibility for verification falls entirely on you, the reader. That's why instructors often prohibit Wikipedia as a citable source in academic writing, even though it can help identify keywords, historical overviews, or references to follow up on elsewhere. Another important principle is never confusing popularity with quality. High view counts, viral posts, or top search results don't indicate accuracy. Search engines and social platforms prioritize relevance, engagement, and paid placement, not truth. Sponsored links appear first because someone paid for that position, not because the content is reliable, which means this is yet another moment where you have to slow down and make an intentional judgment. This leads directly into the issue of fake news, but it's important to recognize that not all problematic information is fully fake. A lot of what circulates online lives in a gray zone. Opinion-driven commentary may be presented as reporting. Influencers may promote health, wellness, or financial advice while being paid by sponsors. Data may be selectively framed to support a particular narrative while leaving out contradictory information. These sources often feel convincing precisely because they mix accurate details with misleading emphasis. Some fake news is intentionally deceptive, created to manipulate opinions or generate profit. Other misinformation spreads because people share content without verifying it, and they repeat claims that they assume must be true. So, before sharing information, it's always crucial to pause and evaluate its source. So when you're reading an article or watching a video, identify the author. If authorship is unclear or deliberately obscured, that's a red flag. Credible sources don't hide basic information about who produced the content. And along the same lines, be wary of vague appeals to authority, like statements that say, experts agree, or studies show, without identifying who those experts are or where those studies can be found. Context matters too. Images can be manipulated or reused in misleading ways. Reverse image searches let you check whether an image originated with the article you're reading or has appeared elsewhere in a different context. Website URLs should also be examined carefully because fake sites often imitate legitimate ones by making subtle changes to domain names that are easy to miss. Headlines deserve particular attention too. Sensational or emotional charged language is often designed to provoke outrage or excitement rather than to inform. If you're feeling strong emotional reactions before you've read an article, that reaction may be intentional. Neutral, measured headlines are far more common in credible reporting. Checking publication dates is another essential step. Old information is sometimes recirculated deliberately to mislead readers when it's no longer accurate or relevant. And finally, critical reading itself is the most important skill of all. Question claims, look for evidence, cross-check information with reputable sources. And if developing those skills feels challenging, there's a dedicated video on critical reading linked in the description box for you. Now that the major red flags and warning signs are clear, head over to the second part of this lecture where the focus shifts to how to research effectively, evaluate sources systemically, and make confident decisions about credibility. I'll see you over there.